Hello and welcome back to another crit race. Today I have for you Buzz the Tower, the 4-5 open field. This was yesterday's race, recording this the day after. We've got quite the stacked field today. Bunch of teams here with lots of guys, pretty deep field. Just generally a lot of strong riders out today. And so I knew going into this was going to be a very tough race for me, and I kind of expected that I wouldn't be able to hang on, but that was my main goal. I was trying to hang on to the group, or at least stick with, a group of people. And I think I mostly succeeded in that. Some of the big teams here, B2C2, 545 Velo, had a couple guys. Phillips Exeter Academy had a team, Tri-State Cycling, Seacoast Racing, Back in Action. There was, all the big names were here. I think this is one of the first official crits on the calendar. Although I think the Frozen 4 races in Farmington, Connecticut might also be USAC official races. And the Wells Avs ones are, but the C race isn't for points, so open questions there. So we start the race off. It's a little cloudy, a little drizzly. Luckily, this is a fairly unique course. It's at Ninigrit Park at an old airbase, I believe. This was my first time here. So I did get to do a practice lap on the track between fields. That was pretty sweet. It's very flat, as you can see. So not too many course features to talk about here because it's super flat. There's no paint, so didn't really worry too much about like slickness, and it never really got that wet. Just a little chilly from the rain and the wind here. The wind, I think, was maybe the biggest feature to talk about. There was a south to north wind, so coming into that the final start-finish straight, you've got a little bit of a tailwind. So drafting was super consequential when you're coming around on that parallel course. And as I mentioned, this was a pretty cool course. The turns, pretty forgiving. I think there was a couple where, based on your speed, they were, maybe you should not pedal through them entirely. But for the most part, the speeds I was going, I was able to pedal through the vast majority of the corners, trying to save energy, just be more efficient and pedal through the corners instead of having to accelerate super hard out of them. As you'll see, there's kind of this surgy nature to the turns here. And you can see the field starting to pick it up now. That first lap, people were warming up a little bit, maybe. It's a little chilly still. And now it's starting to string out. And you can see as we come around to this corner, you can see the folks. There's one person off the front and like a nice line of riders all stretched out as we come around into this turn, and then we'll head into the headwind section. And something happened over here. There were a couple people who overshot the turn, you can see off to the right. Not sure if they just took a bad line or, if someone cut someone off. Luckily, I didn't see any crashes, and so we like to see that. Keep the wheels on the correct side of the pavement. And yeah, so you can see it's strung out. It's a bit messy looking, just trying to stay in the draft here because you're riding into the headwind, which is pretty brutal. Definitely don't want to be eating wind here if you can help it. You can see the field stretching out. There's already kind of a gap with, some riders up the road, like 5 or 6. And I kind of anticipated this. Given this is the 4-5 field, there's a bunch of really strong Cat 4 riders, and we'll talk about some of the really strong riders when we see them later. So I kind of expected these splits, and in my head, I knew if there was a group off the front, I was not going to be strong enough to stick with them. So my objective today was not to try and stick with a breakaway. It was to try and stick with like maybe a main peloton, larger group, where I could kind of try and sit in and not have to eat too much wind. And that works for a little bit. You can see the field stretching out even further, that the group is trying to be chased down, that front group getting a little bigger, and this group struggling to hang on. And in front of me here, we have the red kit. We'll see a lot of them. These are the Phillips Exeter riders from New Hampshire, I believe. I was chatting with one of them after the race briefly because I wasn't familiar with their team. Coming out of this corner, I noticed that I'm carrying a bit more speed than these guys, and they're kind of sitting up a little bit. So I decided to, put a teeny bit more power in and recover a few wheels. I feel like this was a good use of power. Not terrible. I did have to grab some brakes here because this guy, takes the line that he has. I could have tried to snipe the inside line there, but I wasn't feeling super aggressive about it, so did have to bleed some energy and surge back up to get here. Tri-State Cycling, I'm not sure if I mentioned them, but they also had a bunch of guys out today. So like I said, lots of big teams. Back on that headwind straight, just trying to close it down, get in a draft, try and be efficient as much as possible. At this point, my power has been pretty surgy, like all of these turns. You're needing to spike back up just to come back up to speed because we're coasting through them. Part of that coasting I would like to not do, but when you're drafting so close and the group is drafting in front of you, like the whole group kind of slows down. So unless you are super efficient with your lines and kind of leave a gap so you can roll into it, which I try to do occasionally, but I'm not super great at that. So another area of like tiny efficiencies that add up over the course of the race and something that you can work on. So on this turn here, you can kind of see that we've split into two big groups, and now I'm in this second group. There's that front group with a good number of riders in it, looking pretty strong, and we've got a bunch of guys here trying to chase back on, spiking up to 400 or 500 watts, just trying to stick with this group. I think I'm feeling at this point like, oof, I'm not sure we're going to be able to catch on to that front group. And to me, that's kind of okay. They seem pretty strong, and I'm worried that even if I did manage to get to that group, I wouldn't be able to hang on. So I'm thinking I can stick with these guys. If they manage to chase it back, cool, I'll stick with them. But not feeling like that's my primary motivation here, because I'm definitely hurting. My heart rate's up to 185, 186, which is very high for me. That's, not super sustainable. I can kind of keep going there, but I've been doing a lot of efforts over FTP, and this is a longer race. The Wells Avs are, really only 20 minutes of racing, and this is a full 40 minutes. So in the back of my head, I'm definitely being more cognizant about burning those matches and trying to be a little bit of a smarter racer. So here I see this gap starting to open up, and you might be able to pick it up on the mic. And so I'm giving him some encouragement here. A tip that I've seen in some of the NorCal cycling videos is, feel free to communicate, tell the guys what you kind of want them to do. And, they don't have to. It's a race, obviously. We're in competition with each other, but, sometimes, in the moment they think, yeah, I will close that down. And whether that's, a form of encouragement or, not quite tricking them, but like, telling them, hey, close this gap down. And in this case, it kind of worked. He picked up the pace a little bit, and I got to sit in the draft and not worry about closing that gap down. That actually works more than one time in this race, which is really nice, although it doesn't end up helping me out too much, as we'll see. So we're back in the tailwind here in this start-finish straight, and I don't love the way that this gap is looking, and I'm not convinced that this Tri-State Cycling team is going to close it down because of some of the pulls they've been taking. So I pop into the wind here and close this down. In retrospect, I think this was an unnecessary move. The Tri-State Cycling team guys definitely were picking up the pace a little bit there, and I probably could have just stayed in the wheel and let them close this down and saved this match. It wasn't a huge effort, but, like I said, they add up. And the reason I know that is, after this first turn, I turn behind me and look, and they're all back on my wheel. So, I made it a little bit easier for them to close it down. And as a solo rider, I can't be doing that. I have to rely on these teams to kind of try and control the race. And I need to be saving my matches for when it would be efficient as a solo rider to be doing things. more gaps opening up, and this group is surging, trying to catch back on. I'm having to put in a ton of power just to stick in the draft and stay with this group. And this is not, super sustainable for me. We could see that, some of the riders here in this group are sitting up a little bit, not sure if they're going to be able to keep going. But we're still, surging a little bit. Luckily, we're in the tailwind now, so maybe that helps a teeny bit. But I'm down to barely putting in any power. So I think the gap is kind of widening up, and I'm not confident that we're going to close it down. We see one of the Phillips Exeter riders kind of in no man's land right now between the two groups. And I'm thinking, he looks pretty strong. Maybe he's going to pull this back right into this headwind section too. So I give some more encouragement again, and this other Phillips Exeter rider actually, decides to close it down for us, which is nice. This is straight into the headwind, so he's eating a ton of wind right to the face right now. Like, I'm at 260, 250 watts in the wheel, so he's definitely putting in the power. So a nice strong pull here, and he manages to catch back onto this guy. So another case of asking someone to do something and they just kind of go and do it. In terms of tactics, I mean, don't chase your teammates is something I've heard a lot, and maybe it wasn't ideal for him to pull him back, although I think maybe he was going to get caught anyway. But it's also his teammate, so he probably should have relied on the rest of our group to pull it back. But then there's the other thing of we're off the back, so it's a question of, well, yeah, I'm going to catch my teammate, but also we still have to, catch the field. So might not necessarily be able to afford to slow down and let us chase it back, because maybe we can't chase it back. So we've got a small little group here now. This guy's taking a look around behind him, but he's still putting in a decent amount of power, so I definitely don't want to take a turn on the front. He also hasn't flicked the elbow from what I saw, so I'm kind of like, okay, like, go ahead and keep pulling. Like, I'm not gonna offer yet. Although I think eventually I do offer to like roll turns with everybody, because I think at this point we're off the back. Maybe the group in front starts to play games, attacks itself or whatever, and it might be fun to catch back on. So ideally we catch back onto the bigger group, because right now we're a pretty small group of like 5 or 6 riders, I think. So I just let this guy on the front eat the wind again, and we're back in that headwind section. So I really don't want to be on the front here. And he's clearly, he's strong. He's putting in strong pulls. I'm, spiking up to 250, 300 watts. And now, into the headwind, I'm luckily able to bring it back down to 100 watts or so. He's definitely doing a lot more than that in the wind, but, letting me rest a little bit, which I desperately need. So I'm feeling a bit rested, having sat in the wheel for a little bit, and this guy's starting to seem a little tired. So I bring up like, hey, let's roll some turns here, and I offer to take a pull. And as I'm actually doing that, I think the speed slowed enough that another rider decides to come around and take a pull on the front, which I'm happy for. This is the tailwind, so like optimally, it's probably the best section to take a pull on the front. It's a little smarter, but also at this point we're kind of working together. So he flicks me through, and I decide to take a pull. I think measuring my efforts for these pulls would have been smarter. I think part of the reason that I end up getting dropped from this group, spoiler alert, is that when I do take pulls, I'm taking them harder than I should. We're already off the back. Yeah, it'd be cool and fun to catch back onto that group on the front, but they've got quite the gap, and it would be more fun to stick with this group and not blow myself up trying to take, hero pulls that would never bring back that other group. That other group is full of strong riders. One thing here to notice is you can see 3 riders in front of me. I don't have a rear camera, but there are a few more riders in this group. And whether they're, at this point, I'm like, I can't tell if they're intentionally trying to skip turns, if they haven't heard me say like, hey, let's roll together. This is 4-5, so maybe they're not familiar with pace lining. There's lots of things here in my brain. Or maybe they're just so cooked that they can't take a turn. And for at least one of the riders in this group, that is absolutely not the case. He eventually comes through and takes, a crazy pull that, rips apart the group and knocks me off the back. So not sure what his motivations were there. And I did talk to some of the guys after, and I didn't get to talk to the guy who takes that pull with the orange bike, you'll see. But they were mentioning that, he's super strong. But, I'm kind of thinking of this at this point as like a team time trial. I'm not interested in trying to attack this group unless I see something like super fun, but more just a, hey, I'm going to try and roll smooth turns for these guys and finish this race out as fast as we can and try and avoid being lapped because those guys on the front are super strong. And as you'll see, I do not succeed. And I think this whole group ends up getting lapped. And the blue bike over there is Brian. Actually, I got to chat with him before and after the race, so shout out Brian. But yeah, I don't know, looking at the power profile for this was still pretty surgy, so this was not an efficient roll. And I'm definitely, I'm slotting in earlier. There are people skipping turns. I think, we're surging the power up with each pull or at the start of each pull more than we should be trying to, it's just not an efficient pace line, which makes it harder, and it slows us down a little bit. So that ends up hurting me. I mean, some of these guys, they were stronger than me. They rode more efficiently maybe, and they just had better legs today. And, that ends up knocking me off the back, as we'll see. I get the elbow and start taking my turn on the front again. There's a bit of a crosswind too. On that start-finish straight, I mentioned that it was a tailwind, and it's mostly a tailwind, but you'll see sometimes I'm kind of off to the side of the wheel as I'm trying to feel out the best draft. You see my power spikes in this turn up to 290, almost 300. And again, I think that I'm just pulling too hard. I really should just be pulling like right at threshold for me, which right now is around 250. And instead, I'm, eating into my leg's ability to recover by, pushing hard. We're catching some riders who fell off the back of that big group, or maybe we're off the back already. Honestly, this race got super messy. There were so many people, and the field got so splintered that, looking at the race results that they posted, I'm pretty sure that they just scored the first 12 positions, and then everyone who was lapped, they just threw in the list in a random order because, the race results say that I got 14th, which is just, I don't think that's correct. I didn't stay to see the race results because I have, a 2-hour drive home, but I think that I was, a little lower on the results, but they did manage to get all the points worthy positions correct, it seems like, all the riders who weren't lapped. So probably not a huge deal. I think the only thing that it really affects is like your road results calculated points, not your USAC points, which really all that's good for is the race predictor. So it means that the race predictor thinks that I'm a little stronger than I actually am, probably. But I'll take it. We see a B2C2 rider here now. I think we picked him up, or he was in this group already, but he hadn't taken a turn in a while. So he hops on the front, starts to pick it up. We're doing 250 watts into the headwind in the draft, which means whoever's on the front, they're drilling it. So to me, that means that I need to be taking maybe shorter pulls as well as not quite as strong pulls. And then here you can see the guy in the orange bike, he's on the wrong wheel, or I don't know about the wrong wheel, but he's not following the pace line, or he's skipping a turn maybe. But like I said, this guy in the orange on the orange bike, the Cannondale here, he was super strong. He ends up getting on the front and just, drilling it eventually, which feels almost like an attack on the group, but it could have just been, hey, I'm going to take a hard pull now, and no one else could hang on. Yeah, like right here, he accelerates like crazy. Like this is not an efficient way to be riding. And so now he's drilling it into this tailwind section. If I didn't know any better, I'd feel like he's trying to break apart the group, riding super hard into the tailwind when the draft isn't as good. Or he's just not happy with the pace that we're setting. Or he's just having a little fun, getting a little workout in. In any case, this hurts. I'm up to 300, 350, 400 watts, which I just can't maintain, especially with those hard pulls. And as you saw on the left there, the main group, they've got quite the gap on us. So at this point, we're definitely not going to catch them, unless they really all sit up for some reason. But I think that group is too big to do that kind of thing. So I'm hurting, and this is a big mistake, letting this gap kind of stay here and not sticking to this wheel more closely, especially as we're about to come into this headwind section. But, like I mentioned, that guy in the orange bike, he's just drilling it on the front right now. He's really, he's accelerating away. These two guys are looking at each other like, who's going to close that down? And I just, even spiking up to 400, I can't get back on, and I'm out of the draft, going into this headwind. The other guys in the group are like, they come around me with some speed because they're thinking they got to close this down. And I also knew that I had to close it down, but just the legs weren't there to do it. And I think that, the legs, I knew that I couldn't really chase this back on unless they kind of sat up. And if they rolled even a little efficiently, they were going to get accelerated away from me. And they do. The gap kind of grows and grows. So I think to myself, this is my chance to just kind of do a solo time trial and get a good workout in. So here we see the front of the race zooming by, just these two riders off the front, both in the Back in Action team, just smoothly rolling a team time trial now. And in that group is Caleb Brackbill from the Back in Action team, and he actually wins this race. And earlier in this day was in the 3-4 race and got on the podium there as well, which is just nuts. Like, that's so strong, super strong legs. And I think I saw on Strava that, winning both of these races today, or at least getting on the podium in both races, was enough to upgrade him to Cat 3. So congrats to him for that. And here we see the chase group, the main peloton of the race. So I'm off to the side, giving him some encouragement because I'm, out of contention at this point. The organizers were talking about how they might have to pull riders just because of how crazy it is. And I just want to be out of the way and let the folks who are, in the race still, competing for points, do the best they can. I'm not going to try and grab onto this group because, at this point I'm pretty cooked. There's no way I could hang on. I'm struggling to even maintain FTP. My back is hurting. My, legs are pretty much empty. I'm just going to, finish out these laps and, get to the end of the race. And I actually end up getting double lapped by this lead group because, you know, when you're off riding by yourself at 20 miles an hour and their team time trialing and they're just as strong as they are, you know, they're able to do that. So now I really know I'm out of contention, you know. So here I am getting caught by another group. And like I mentioned, this race was so crazy. I'm not even sure, like, I'm pretty sure these are the guys lapping me because that orange Cannondale was the guy who was, you know, ripping apart this group before. I think this is the group that I was with. So it seems like they got lapped by the lead group, but maybe not the chase group. I don't know. It's so hard to tell. But there were a bunch of groups here, and this is the last lap. These guys I definitely did pass, so I knew that they were also lapped riders with me. You know, I could hear them chatting, and at one point they're like, "Hey, do you want to sprint to each other?" And I was like, and they, you know, just said, "Yeah, let's, you know, leave it all out on the line." So I figured, okay, might as well join them for a little sprint, and so we'll watch that here. And a bit cheeky of me to kind of, you know, chill in the draft here as we're, you know, scooting towards the finish. But, you know, it's all in good fun. You know, we're just, you know, we're not in contention for any points or anything in this race. We're just, you know, here to have a good time at this point. So they're starting to pick up the pace a little bit here. He opens his sprint. I stand up and I'm starting to put in, you know, everything that I have, and I'm like, oh, is this going to be enough? I pop out into the wind. You know, he comes a little bit to the left, but leaves me plenty of space. He goes back to the right, and I managed to cross the line just before them with, you know, maybe a wheel. You know, not a big accomplishment. You know, they've been rolling together for a long time, but it was fun. It was a good time to sprint at the end there. This was a super tough race. You could look at the stats here. Really high intensity for me. Weighted average power a bit lower than some of the Wells Ave races, but also I was, you know, solo time trialing and cooked for a longer race. So I think overall pretty good power numbers. Got a lot more training to do. This is still the very beginning of the season, so I'm hoping that I can pump some of these numbers up in time for the Harvard Road Race. And like some of the other big crits on the calendar, like Devon's and maybe the Thompson race as well. So thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you like the content. If you have any questions or anything, throw them in the comments. Thanks.